Hi everyone, Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd, and you are listening to another episode of the Needle Drop Podcast. In this episode, I say every episode's a special episode, but this one's special to me because it deals directly with what I do. It's a very meta episode. How to review an album. What is my process? What is the process generally when going about reviewing a musician's new record? And I would like to try to address this, but I felt like doing it simply by myself wouldn't quite make sense because I feel like there are so many different approaches and viewpoints on this issue. And not to assume that I'm going to get through all of them today in this one episode. This could, in fact, be a part of an ongoing series. But I hope in this new podcast to kind of scratch the surface of that with the first of what is going to be my two guests in this episode. Zoe Camp is an up-and-coming music writer who has written for a myriad of different publications, including The Fader and Pitchfork and, God, I'm forgetting all of them.
I think, Spin, Tiny Mixtapes, whomever will have me. I'll just do that.
So, and I've caught a lot of Zoe's writing, and I enjoy what she writes. I enjoy her perspectives on things, and I figured not only would she be able to give a good perspective on the process of how to go about creating an album review, but being a younger reviewer, I feel like you would probably be able to give some more relatable perspectives to my relatively young audience who kind of have questions about how exactly do you kind of start out with doing what you do. So, having said all that, thanks for coming on and talking with me about all this stuff.
Hey, thanks for having me. I mean, I was watching your show back in 2010, so I was one of the people who are probably listening to this right now. So it's really cool to come full circle, and I'm just really humbled to be here.
No problem. And that humbles me as well to sort of think that people have been watching me and listening to me for that long. But I think at the end of this year, it will be 10 years of the Needle Drop in some way, shape, or form, because it started out as a podcast. So it's kind of 10 years old at this point, which is kind of weird to think. Because I'm yet to really kind of give myself a moment to breathe and think about how all of it happened. But to just kind of get right into the conversation, let's say you are at the top of your very ritzy Brooklyn high-rise apartment. You're sipping you're sipping a Merlot. You're eating a panini. Maybe you're reading something really deep, something really profound, and then on the ledge comes down a carrier pigeon with a message, and you take that message off the carrier pigeon. It's a note. It's a hand scrawled note from Ryan Schreiber. It is it's an assignment. You have to cover the brand new Flaming Lips album that just dropped out of the blue. The deadline is at the end of the week or something. So you've got to get to work on it. You've got to get started right away. And also attached to the carrier pigeon is a USB of the album. So you've got it all right there. So you've got to get to work. What is step one of the process? How exactly do you begin? Is it just plain listening to the record? Do you do some research? Are you lighting some candles? Like, what is the start? What is step one of your process?
What I usually do first whenever I get an album, if it's by an artist that I'm not familiar with, you want to do a deep dig and find out as much as you can about them and look over their discography. That's why Discogs is like a music writer's best friend, because it helps you get a better idea of like their entire discography as a whole. And even if I have heard them, I'm usually going to take another listen to like my favorite records of theirs just to kind of get an idea of their career as a whole and trying to kind of situate it. Because one of the first things that your job is as a critic is to be able to write about these albums, and you can be familiar with all the stuff an artist has done, but the reader might not. So you're kind of trying to kind of give exposition in a way, kind of like that dude always in all those anime fights. In any anime, there's always some guy giving all the exposition about like, this is their superpower, da-da-da-da. So yeah,
got it. Yeah, explaining what's going on before it's about to happen or something.
Yeah, pretty much. So I do that a lot have to kind of figure that out myself before I get started. But then,
so that's even before you start listening to it, you'd say.
just trying to kind of get yourself grounded in it before you start listening.
Okay, so you're kind of doing some research on, their past records, trying to potentially, prepare yourself for any kind of connections to stuff they've put out in the past, as far as like their previous material and what is going to be kind of their ongoing artistic evolution. What's going through your mind? And, before I ask this question, that's very similar for me as well. I will say, though, I do kind of do a lot of things on top of each other. I may be listening to the new record while simultaneously doing that sort of research and looking back into their older stuff and, going on websites like Discogs. I go on Rate Your Music or Wikipedia or something like that. Those are sort of my resources as well. But once you actually put the record on, sort of what's your mindset? Do you try to get all that stuff done that you were just talking about beforehand so that when you put the record on, it's only the record and nothing else is happening?
Oh, I mean, I wish I had the time to do that, but a lot of times I'm multitasking, so I'm looking at a Discogs page or the Rate Your Music page while I'm listening to something. But I think the best way is, in terms of like listening to an album, is to do it in a bunch of different contexts. So you're going to want to sit down and listen to the album without any distractions, but you're probably also going to want to listen to it if you have a car while you're driving, listen to it while you're walking, play it when you have people over, kind of just see how they react. It's your opinion, but everybody experiences music in different ways. Everybody has a different listening process. And a lot of people, I think, view music as a social kind of activity too.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And experience it in different settings to kind of see how it holds up as a whole. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of similar for me as well. I mean, I will admit I'm not quite having as many listening parties with albums these days. A lot of what I do is sort of more focused where I'm living and just kind of my family life and everything. But, it's very true. I'm listening to this kind of either on headphones, I give it a shot on the stereo so I can hear it sort of in a louder, sort of more panoramic kind of sense, listening to it in the car, listening to it just kind of on my small headphones on a run, listening to it on bigger headphones in the gym or something like that. Hitting up other people who I may not have listened to the record with personally, but I know have heard the record or I know are into the record. And I'm just like, what did you think about this? Did you give a listen to this? And that's especially the case if it's kind of like a high profile album. If it's sort of something that is a little bit more of a personal favorite of mine, I feel a little bit more comfortable kind of taking just sort of a bit of a solo venture on it as far as like what my personal experience is. But, you do kind of want to check in with other people, especially if it's like a record a lot of people are listening to, just kind of be like, what did you think of this track? Or am I like sort of off base when I say that, like, God, this song is awful. It just like hit me really bad. It just like hit me in this really raw, ugly way. But then, maybe once you get an opinion from another person who I guess whose perspective you trust, it could kind of change the way that you feel about it, which, I would like to say isn't necessarily a bad thing as a critic. I guess it's just important that you be conscious of when that happens and be conscious of, who you're letting in. I mean, before I put out a review, and I'm sure you are as well, I'm careful not to read any reviews, but there are certainly people who I trust personally who I will ask for what their thoughts on a particular record are before I say what I think about it, just to kind of make sure that what I'm saying is making sense.
Oh, definitely. And to be clear here, when I'm also talking about like having listening parties, I don't mean if you are lucky enough to get like, an album promo, that's really for your ears only. But sometimes like if an album just comes out, like you said, a big one, I'll like listen to it. Like if I happen to be visiting home for the weekend, play it for my parents, because my dad, he was a music critic in his college days at Ohio State. And, he's one of the people I respect the most when it comes to music. So sometimes I do that, but at the same time, you're right when you say don't read other reviews. You kind of need to do it on your own, because otherwise, if we're all like writing criticism relative to what other people are generally thinking, then it's kind of just becomes an echo chamber and it's pointless.
Yeah. To sort of ask a slightly personal question off of what you just said, does your father keep up with a lot of contemporary stuff as well? Are you able to kind of bounce ideas off of him and he's like, oh, I think A, B, or C?
Oh, 100%. He collects all the 33 1/3 books. So I remember in school, I would go home and just like read over, because he's always ordering albums off Amazon. In terms of modern stuff, I mean, I'm trying to think the most recent modern band that he bought. He got the Kurt Vile record, I know, and I think he's into everything on Matador. I think labels for a lot of people, labels are, I think, also a considerable sign of whether or not something's like worth your attention or not. But yeah.
Yeah, labels are definitely kind of playing a bit of a boutique kind of curation sort of role these days. I think more than ever. You know, it's almost like with everybody being able to put their music out on the internet, it's kind of like a seal of approval in a sense.
Yeah, it sets certain levels of expectations too, because it's all, it can all be connected to hype and whatnot. I mean, let's not forget that Car Seat Headrest, before he got to Matador, that was all because people were talking him up online.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You know, and that's another thing, sort of the grassroots, I guess, kind of hype that artists can now build up through platforms like SoundCloud and Bandcamp, and sort of how interested record labels are in kind of capitalizing on that, because to sort of sign on an artist who basically has no name brand recognition whatsoever before you've kind of brought them on can be a really tough sell, even if you are a label that does have some credibility. If you can grab onto an artist like Car Seat Headrest, they've already done so much of the legwork for you in terms of being able to spread the word about that particular artist.
Yeah, definitely.
To go off of another thing that you were saying and kind of get back onto the review track, you made a quick mention of promos, which I think is worth mentioning that especially for big albums, like as reviewers, we are seeing less and less and less of them. Like a lot of us are hearing the album when, in fact, you guys hear the album when it drops either on iTunes or it drops on Spotify or it drops on Apple Music or whatever. For you personally as a reviewer, has that sort of made your job a little bit more difficult, that you got to kind of come out with this review in a very timely fashion? How many days do you feel like you actually have? Because, I mean, once an album comes out, that's pretty much the end of the hype cycle, for the most part. Like if that album has come out and there's been no promo for it, and your review is not out the day that the album comes out, like you have to have that review out, you have to have that take out in the next several days, or else nobody's even going to be looking for a review anyway. So, how exactly has that kind of affected your process, the lack of promos, especially for big albums these days, out of fear of albums leaking?
Oh, it definitely puts you on the spot, because a lot of albums obviously, take a lot of time to really appreciate them for what they are. I know I was definitely that way with To Pimp a Butterfly. At the first time I heard it, it didn't really, it didn't, and that, was really, that was a surprise release, wasn't it? Didn't that just like come up out of nowhere?
Yeah, that just kind of dropped out of the blue, and the thing is with a lot of these records too, and you kind of mentioned To Pimp a Butterfly there, another thing with some of these albums, and it could be To Pimp a Butterfly, could be Beyonce's Lemonade, could be, like whatever the latest Swans record is going to be. Not only are these albums dropped out of the blue, they're often conceptual in some kind of way, but a lot of them are very, very long. It's not like an album is dropped out of the blue and you have to digest some 45 or 35 minute record. You have to digest a 60-minute record, a 90-minute record in a matter of a few days.
Yeah. I guess you're going to be, if you really love music, I guess you got to be down, and you really want to do a good job, you got to be down to like listen to one album all night, which, that's one way to do it. But yeah, it's tricky. I think it's also made trickier because the economy of music journalism is we expect a verdict on the spot. And, it's definitely forcing it. It really comes all back to like going with your gut, And I really do think that a lot of times your base instincts involving a record are the ones you want to trust. Not because people are saying that it's good, not because people say that it's important. Go with because, when you listen to it, does it make you feel happy? Do you enjoy listening to it? Do you want to listen to it again? It's kind of stuff like that too. So I definitely go with that. But for stuff, with like To Pimp a Butterfly that might not be as instantly accessible, yeah, it definitely is challenging, because I think I'm just one of those people that I like music to be very kind of immediately gratifying in that sense. So having a closer period of time to basically study, yeah, that's hard.
And to kind of go off of that question, in your experience, how, and so many people ask me this question. In your experience, how many times do you feel, on average, you have listened to an album and then, sort of you're adequately satisfied with your opinion and your take on the album, just the baseline? How many times do you listen to an album before you review it? I know for me, it's anywhere from 4 to 7 times on average,
Totally. I think 4 to 7 is a really good ballpark. I mean, I oftentimes are more like, sometimes 3 to 6. I definitely think at least 3 times, and it shouldn't be 3 back to back to back. You should ideally be spacing it out so you can, because you're going to have different, like your experience might vary slightly depending on that, and you want to kind of, do that. But I also will basically, I'll listen to it so many times. I'll sit down to write the review. And if I want to articulate something or double check a lyric or something, I'll definitely replay songs. As far as whether or not my opinion has changed, like after publication, there's definitely been records that have I've grown to like more than I think I might have, it might have come across. Like, I reviewed the Mastodon Once More Around the Sun, and I didn't really, at the time, I really didn't like it. And listening to it now, I think I like it more than I thought I did. Like I find myself coming back to it because it's pretty catchy. But at the same time, I listen to, Remission or something, and I'm like, oh yeah. So, I mean, sometimes it fluctuates, but
no, I mean, I'm really glad you brought that up because that was definitely going to be one of my questions. Because people ask me that all the time as well. Like, has my opinion ever changed after publication? And it has, but I've never had an experience, and, you tell me if this is, for you as well. I've never had an experience where I did a complete and total 180 on an album. It's usually by very slight degrees of positivity or negativity, either in the case of, the last Beastie Boys album or the pop groups, Citizen Zombie, which I was super excited about when they came out. I loved the first week that I heard it, and now I still think they're good, but I don't, think they're quite as amazing when they were, when they hit me on first impact. I think as an example of a record that, and people will probably not be happy to hear this, but I think I didn't give quite enough credit to 2 Chainz Based on a True Story when it came out. And it's because when I listen to it now, I just think it's so funny. I just find him so hilarious, and I think he's such a witty and an entertaining.
Oh my gosh, I reviewed that too. And I gave it 1.5 stars out of 5. It was for Tiny Mixtapes.
Like I did not give it a positive review either.
I really think that 2 Chainz, at the end of the day, you're not supposed to take him seriously. And I was looking at like, man, he's not telling any stories. He's not like doing anything really special. I mean, these are repetitive. And I put in gems like, she got a big booty, so I call her Big Booty. And now, like, looking back, that's funny. I mean, it's almost just like, I mean, you said meta earlier. That's kind of a meta. It's like rapping about rapping.
Exactly. And the thing is, again, there are probably some people who are mad to hear that is the album that I kind of feel like, wow, out of all my out of all my reviews,
dipping it like fondue.
Yes.
Dip cheese stick.
I just think it's so funny, and I find him more entertaining on that record than I have on any of his latest records, because the reason I sort of went back to that album is I was listening to some of his latest mixtapes because I was like, oh, I might review this, I may cover this or whatever, and in that process, like you were saying earlier, I went back and heard Based on a True Story just to kind of recontextualize it, and I was like, wait, I disliked this, and and not to say that I think it's amazing now. It's not, fucking Illmatic or anything. But, it is a very funny, entertaining album, which, like you were saying, I think a lot of people going into that record, because maybe he was a new artist, because he sort of had that Kanye endorsement, maybe went into the album expecting something a little bit more serious than they actually got, which maybe leads us to another good question about this podcast topic, and that is where do expectations lie for you in terms of importance when you're going into an album? Can expectations ruin an album for you? Do you do your best to try to get rid of any and all expectations when you go into a record, or are expectations perfectly okay?
Expectations are perfectly okay, I think, insofar as if you know that an artist is capable of reaching a 9 or a 10, I think that you can kind of hold them to that standard. But also, I do believe that, you know, as a band gets on in age, like, I'm trying to think, like, I feel like judging a Who album that came out this year by the standards of, you know, an album like Tommy or Who's Next would be completely unfair. I mean, for one, because it has completely different members, and that's like apples to oranges in terms of personnel. That's just not fair. But two, I think that, you know, sometimes some artists peak super early, and sometimes, you know, it's a matter of fact that everything they put out after a certain point isn't that good. And maybe one of the reasons that you come to that opinion is because everything before it was so great. And, you know, we tend to do that a lot, I think, with also bands like Weezer and stuff, or, you know, bands that have like so many works of genius, and then also they put out so many bad albums that you start to think that an album that is slightly less bad is somehow deemed awesome. So I think by those standards too, you have to kind of.
I mean, also for comparison, I think you know, just the record that Kendrick just dropped, because to have to follow up to Pimp a Butterfly would be a difficult task, even for the artist who made that record. You know, now sort of in his, you know, weird left hook Kendrick kind of way, you know, he did follow it up by doing something completely different, just in the same way that he followed up Good Kid, Mad City by doing something completely different. You know, he seems like the kind of artist who, rather than trying to build on top of what he does and, you know, sort of grow in grandiosity of statement and in artistic scope each time, he just sort of re-evolves and re-evolves and re-evolves. You know, and still, I think, at least for me, I kind of anticipated that was going to happen. So, I mean, at least for me, it was kind of like hitting a reset button. But still, I didn't come away from the record feeling like it was as great as anything he had done in the past. But the mere fact that I felt that way, to a lot of the people who watch me, read as, oh, he hates the album. I expected this to be an 8, 9, or 10, you know? So it's not even just the expectations of the writer, but also the expectations of the reader too, because, you know, when people follow music reviews on a regular basis, it's almost like, you know, they know, or they feel that they know what artists are going to get 8s, what artists are going to get 9s, what artists are going to get 10s, and what artists are going to get like a 2 or a 0 or a B- or C+ or whatever.
I mean, and also just think of it this way, like, is Damn going to be an album that 10 years down the line, when somebody says, hey, you want to listen to Kendrick Lamar, what's going to be the album you reach for? Yes,
that is a question that's always in my head. I don't feel like it's in the head of other people, and I feel like that's, you know, I don't think it's a generational thing. I think it's a personal thing. You know, there are some people who don't really seem to care about whether or not what you're listening to is going to have any lasting power. But to me personally, that's kind of significant, especially when you're talking in terms of like what records are classic and what records aren't. You know, while I feel the application of that term is, you know, can be sort of warranted when you're talking about a modern record that a lot of people are behind and seems to be getting a lot of critical acclaim. It's okay, it's cute, but, you know, for me, like, the truest application of that word is that, you know, this album, you know, long after the generation that grew up with To Pimp a Butterfly are fat and old and having kids and are probably not listening to much new music anymore, you know, do their kids hear that record for the first time and think, wow, this is amazing? You know, because to me, that's the mark of a real classic record, that a generation of people who didn't grow up in that culture, didn't grow up in that time period, didn't grow up in that era in which that album makes pure and total sense, hear that album and they're like, wow, this is great. You know, because I feel like context of culture means so much when it comes to the enjoyment of an album. And, you know, especially for popular music, it's almost purely that in a lot of ways, because, you know, you don't have a lot of kids these days listening to the Four Seasons, you know, or listening to fucking any number of completely dated and, you know, completely irrelevant synth pop or like new romantic groups that came out during the 80s, that were very kind of like trendy and of the time. And I feel like, while we may try to do our best to make sense of what music out there is great today, we don't completely know what is and what isn't going to go out of style. There are tons of artists from the 90s now that you wouldn't think would be translating to this younger generation in the way that they are. But, lo and behold, there are tons of millennials that are listening to Tribe Called Quest. There are tons of millennials that are listening to Lauryn Hill. There's just no way to predict this stuff, I think.
You touched upon a really good point about a sign of a good album being something that a generation later, it still feels fresh and relevant and relatable. And I think it's also true, for example, a lot of people ask me, why do some metal albums get best new musics? Why do other metal albums not, even if they're not as good? Say like the Vector record.
Sure.
Now, obviously, I can't speak on behalf of Pitchfork, but in my own experiences as somebody that writes a lot about metal, I think what pushes a metal album from something that every metalhead loves to something that's an instant classic is if people who are not metalheads can listen to it and enjoy it. An example of this, what I think would be like Electric Wizard's Dope Throne, or the most recent Power Trip album. I feel like you can have fun with that record and really get a kick out of it, even if you aren't somebody that listens to that type of music all the time. And I think that's also true for jazz and experimental. And I think that's, that kind of crossover and wider potential and what it means within the broader landscape of music as a whole, popular music is important, I think. And really thinking about that. Obviously, people are going to hear that and say, oh, well, that means if something is more, crossover and accessible, that must mean that, doesn't that kind of make it reductive? And I don't think that's true. I think it's more about impact and force. I think that Oneatrix Point Never, all of his stuff, he's consistently great because you can listen to that and have not heard a single IDM record in your life, and you can still it's something you'll think about later, it sticks with you. It's unique.
Yeah, you don't necessarily need to take a master class in IDM or experimental electronic music to sort of appreciate what's going on Replica, for example.
Yeah, and a lot of, I think, other stuff, although a lot of records sometimes I think if it's too esoteric, and then it can be great for you by your own standards. And that's, as a music critic, one of the great things about criticism these days is that thanks to YouTube and thanks to the fact that people can just kind of run their own blogs and do their own shit, is that you can kind of suit your stuff to your own audience. One of the greatest burdens, I think, of being a critic for mainstream sites is that your audience includes people some people listen to nothing but metal. Some people listen to no metal, but lots of jazz. Some people listen to Billboard Hot 100 and nothing else. And you have to make sure that everybody, regardless of where they're coming from, can understand what you're talking about and kind of get an impression of what the album sounds like and if it's good or not.
And I feel like as a critic, there's more pressure to have heard more as far as different genres and styles these days, because the listener is hearing more too, because the internet just gives you so much easy access to so many different sounds. Because over the past 10 years or so, we've seen so many cultural barriers break down, and thanks to the internet. And now it's easier for people who didn't grow up listening to hip hop get into hip hop. It's easier for people who didn't grow up listening to black metal get into black metal. Previously, these very insular musical cultures have just been totally ripped wide open for everybody to observe and critique and comment on and listen to and learn about with the same kind of depth and breadth that somebody who sort of grew up with that sound or grew up with that culture did. And, I not that I expect you to have a comment on this, but this is just kind of a thought at the top of my head. But I do think that has caused sort of a weird bit of tension or bitterness between, I guess you could say, old school people and new school people. And I feel like that also kind of contributes to, in a way that sort of niche entertainment sphere that you're talking about in terms of, specifically the metal community. And it happens everywhere, where you have these publications and reviewers who only review one style, and then you kind of as an outsider who is more concerned with like, how does this fit into the grander scheme of music? You sort of see some releases being congratulated or celebrated when, like, in the grander scheme of things, does this really matter?
I think that tension also can, that tension can be frustrating, because I think that niche sites, so to speak, play just as important a role. Because if you're really hardcore into music, like when I want to know about, some like blackcore album or grindcore album, Rate Your Music, I think is actually a really good source for finding out general opinions and like getting it. It can be heavy on the jargon, but if you know the jargon for like any different genre, if you want to get technical, that's a great place. And those places definitely really have an important role in the overall landscape of music writing. And I think that there's nothing really wrong with that. I think that there's different lanes, and it's important that I think each lane be able to kind of still maintain its own identity. And I definitely think that while it's great that critics are, a lot of websites are covering a more wide variety of music, that doesn't mean that having conversations within restricting it to one genre or style are somehow obsolete or less important because they're not looking at the big picture. It's just different. It's an issue of optics, really, and like what prism you decide to view the album in. Are you viewing it within the prism of its genre, of the artist, or do you really want to think about it in terms of the grand scheme? And I think your mileage may vary according to that, and a review can be all of the above, as long as it at the end of the day tackles one of them. That's important.
No, I absolutely agree. And the thing is, there are loads of artists who I enjoy that, I've given very positive reviews to, who, really kind of only appeal to a niche at the end of the day. The niche is not necessarily a bad thing, because that can sort of be a bit of a petri dish for interesting ideas to sort of blossom out of that wouldn't have blossomed at any other place. Moving on from there, going into a record, do you feel like you have any kind of general criteria that you look for or listen to in an album, or are you really kind of resetting every time you hear a new album, or resetting every time you hear a different artist? Is it are there pieces of criteria that apply to every record you hear, or is it really on an artist by artist basis, or is it more on an album by album basis?
No, there's generally, regardless,
or even a genre basis.
Oh yeah, regardless of genre, there are certain characteristics I always, whenever I'm taking notes on something as I'm listening to it, which I don't always do. Sometimes that kind of all comes together as I'm writing it after listening to it, but notes are oftentimes useful for organizational purposes. But, categories like how are the songs arranged? How are the musicians, regardless of what they're playing, can they play competently? Do the beats sound good? Regardless if the drums are synthetic or if the drums are live. Do the songs as a whole on the album flow together? Is there a beginning, middle, and end to it? Or does every single song sound the same? How do they approach different types of, lyrical? If there are lyrics, are the lyrics good? Are they maybe, and also getting back to the general questions that we mentioned before, like, what does this album add to the conversation that we're having? Regardless of how big that conversation is. How does it compare to the artist's previous work? How does it compare to what you can listen to now? And just those general questions. But I would say the big categories are, the arrangements, the technical performances on it. And I think framing and pacing is super important and doesn't get discussed enough by a lot of critics. Because I'll tell you, if there's one thing that can really make or break an album for me, it's the pacing. Because there's nothing like...
Are you talking like the way the album moves from track to track?
Exactly,
or
exactly. So many albums start off really strong. Like the first 4 tracks, they just go right one after the other. They blend into each other seamlessly. And a lot of times albums just kind of plateau, or worse off, the worst are when it's really good at the start and then it's boring and then it's really good at the end.
Or like you were just saying, or a record that feels like it doesn't truly get exciting until you're 4 tracks in or something.
I definitely think that obviously everybody listens. There's a reason that people like different types of music. There's what makes a rock album good or a pop album good isn't going to be the same as what makes an ambient album good, because it's all about different moods. But I think that the common language, so to speak, is I don't know, things like arrangement, delivery, technique, stuff like that.
No, I agree with everything you're saying here. But I think what's important to kind of stress to the listener to kind of categorize these details is when we're talking like super general things that apply to every album. It sounds as if, and again, I agree with what you're saying, but it seems like everything you're saying could almost be categorized into almost technical things, like you were saying, the ability for the musician to perform. What's the recording quality like? These are sort of almost the objective truths of modern music, whether or not something sounds distorted or something sounds smooth or something is loud or something is soft.
Yep.
And then beyond that, there are sort of minuscule bits of criteria that you can apply to whatever genre the record is, whoever the artist is, based on what they've released before, what you know about the artist, and that specific record itself, depending on what that album's mission is.
That is genuine. I think that's an important thing. Does it sound like they're putting on a show or an affectation, or does it sound like something that's like really like in the moment? You know what I mean? And I think you can tell that. I mean, and I think that applies to any genre. And
Sure.
I think that you kind of know it when you hear it.
These sort of these criteria, no matter whether or not they're fitting into this grander category, whether we're talking about authenticity or that sort of performance quality that you were talking about, that genuineness that you were talking about, or sort of maybe what you could apply to a record more specifically if it's a rock album, for example.
Definitely.
Do any of these categories rank higher or lower in terms of importance to you, or is it really just kind of a case-by-case basis? Can you have a completely technically sound album, but it's the worst thing you've ever heard because it fails by every metric that you can apply to it as a rock album? Or, can you have a great rock album that completely lacks any and all sort of technical ability or coherence? Do these different sort of types of criteria, do they rank in different ways of importance to you, I guess?
Well, for me personally, I put a real big emphasis, as I said before, on the pacing and the basic structure of it, just like watching a movie, honestly.
So personally, that's one of the most important things for you.
Yeah, definitely. If the album has like an arc and a build to it, and because I think that has a real bearing on the experience, honestly. I think it's really, I put a big emphasis on also if it just feels like a cohesive experience, or if it just sounds like a bunch of songs thrown together.
Yeah, it could be lopsided toward the beginning or the end, or just like a compilation of sorts.
But I mean, I will say this, like for an album, for me, I'm much more likely to give it. I also look at it by a track basis and look at the songs in and of themselves. So for me, like structure is important, not just for an album as a whole, but within the specific songs themselves. So yeah, I just want, I guess, to put it in just plain speak, it's like it's important that it has a point and it makes the point and it doesn't overdo it and it doesn't undersell it. That the album, that the music has something to say and it says it well.
All right. I mean, I think that's a good way to put it. And, I feel like we can go on forever on this topic. There's so much to say about it. And I have other things that I would like to ask you, but, just for the sake of keeping this podcast at a somewhat, moderate length. But for you personally, when you're done with writing the review or in the middle of writing the review, whenever you think of this, generally, what are you trying to tell the reader when you're writing a review? What are you trying to communicate to the reader? What do you want them to know by the time they've read the last paragraph of whatever review you've written?
It all basically comes down to one question, and that is, why should you care? Like, what are you going to get out of listening to this album? Is it worth taking 30 to 90 minutes of your time listening to it? And what can you expect out of it? Nothing more, nothing less. I mean, if we wanted to be more, like, really honest, it'd be, should you buy the CD or not? But we're living in the year 2017, and that question, I think, in the age of Soulseek and Mediafire and everything, good luck. The consumer guide aspect of it, I think, is quickly growing obsolete. So I mean, but yeah, on a basic level, it's just like, why should I care?
Those very same questions sort of run through my mind as well. I guess for me personally, what I'm most sort of interested in telling the viewer, a lot of the time, I think the viewer has almost made a decision as to whether or not the album is worth their time because they're already clicking on a review of it.
Yep.
So I mean, I feel like they've already kind of made that decision for themselves. What I'm trying to tell them, assuming that they didn't listen to it already, because there are some people who, and I'm sure, watch my reviews as well as read your reviews after they've already listened to something. And, maybe they're kind of sitting there and thinking, I'm still trying to figure this out. Maybe I'll get another opinion or something. So, I mean, at least for me personally, what I'm trying to do by the end of a review is kind of give the listener a heads up as to what is on the album, what's the album trying to do, and whether or not I think it kind of succeeds at it. And I feel like there are kind of varying degrees as to how you accomplish going about doing that, whether you're talking about an album that seemingly just seems like a smattering of tracks. Is it a top 40 record? Is it, the new Carly Rae Jepsen album, or is it the new Kendrick Lamar album, which, going into each artist's record, you're going to expect, a different kind of tone, a different kind of style, a different kind of level of conceptuality going into the album. I guess it's just me trying to explain the mission statement of the artist, because no artist comes right out and says what their mission statement is, because, for the most part, that may just in fact kind of ruin what they're trying to do. But obviously listeners are still curious to understand it and want to know about it. And I guess I'm doing my best to kind of give that perspective on it, while also kind of coming in afterwards to kind of say, okay, so now that I've explained what exactly goes on, here's how I actually feel about it. Like I didn't like it, or I did like it. And then after I've kind of explained that, I kind of try to get to the heart of as to why, I ended up sort of with that feeling, because while I do agree with what you were saying earlier about like trying to compare, a new Who record to a record that they came out with during their heyday, sure, it's unfair. It doesn't make sense. But I mean, at least for me personally, I feel like I'm kind of doing that, maybe not in a conscious way, like, oh, it's just not as good as their old stuff. But I feel like in a sort of way, I am kind of doing that in a roundabout sense, because I don't so much feel like I'm coming out with a different criteria or feeling on each individual album. I mean, I can't help but think about what Weezer used to do in the past when I listen to a new Weezer album, but I am trying to base each score and each reaction that I come together with on just kind of general sense of enjoyment, and to me, that's sort of what ends up making an album great. Does it kind of reach that threshold of like peak enjoyment for me? Does it kind of like scratch all of those entertainment itches that I feel like I have when I went into the album? Did I get everything that I wanted and more, I guess, is sort of what makes a record and a listen sort of significant to me. And that's sort of what I want to communicate to the viewer. Did that happen for me? And if not, why not? And if so, what exactly made the album so great that it kind of reached that level for me?
It really is about expectations versus reality, and you're kind of laying out both of them. You're kind of trying to say what the expectations were, what you think the artist's expectations were with this project, what they're trying to put out, what the ideal is, what our expectations are based on what they've done so far, and, what the reality is. Does it live up to what the artist intended? Does it live up to your expectations? And yeah, is it enjoyable? Because an album can seem like super important, but if it's not fun to listen to, I mean, and it's interesting, talking about looking back at reviews and how like your opinion changed, because, when albums like when Lou Reed's Metal Machine music came out, everybody absolutely hated it and called it a crock of shit. And now people think of it as like one of the most important albums in noise.
Sure.
So, it's fluid, and criticism doesn't exist in a vacuum, and it's malleable and it's imperfect, but I think people like you and me, we do our best.
All right, I want to thank you for coming on and talking with me about all this stuff. I mean, you've been fantastic giving your opinion, and hopefully we've kind of given people a better ideas to, I don't know, how to go into the idea of music criticism. Again, I feel like we've barely scratched the surface, but I feel like we talked about some pretty big topics here.
Yeah, I mean, thanks for having me on. I wish I was a little bit more coherent, but it's the end of the week.
I will leave a link to Zoe's Twitter page down there, which, I mean, you can catch her posting a lot of her reviews over there, but also, you know, some of her hilarious tweets, which I'm a really huge fan of, which she posts all the time.
Well, definitely, I post most of my stuff on Twitter. Most of it is just about the band Muse, who are terrible. But I also am helping to run up this new site called Clairvoyant, and that's CLRVYNT.com. And we focus more on punk and hardcore metal. And I'm sure, as you probably heard, I talk a lot about metal. So we're trying to kind of focus and double down on that. So if you're into that kind of stuff, or if you just want to like hear new music, check it out.
Let's say we run back that scenario that I said at the beginning of the very episode, but instead you're past a USB of the brand new Muse album. Do you go into the review? Do you reset and be like, okay, I'm going to try to objectively review this record. I'm gonna honestly give a real take on this album and give it a shot, or do you just hand in your resignation right there?
You know what? At the end of the day, I do it for the kids. So I really have to. I'll lay it down because, and I have to. And I guess, you know, you made an on-air admission, so I'll make an on-air admission that Absolution, Sing for Absolution was one of the first CDs I got in middle school. You know. So
there's a bit of a personal history there.
I got it. You got to do what you got to do.
Yeah.
Even Radiohead read it. But yeah, there, I said it. I bought a Muse album once.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for coming on and ruining your career on this podcast. I mean, you'll be greatly missed. I'm going to miss your writing. I'm going to miss, you know, your online antics, but I'm glad you decided to sort of put it to bed here.
For the record, I did torch the CD, the subsequent fit of rage. So.
All right. Thanks so much for coming on and talking with me.
All right.
And now in the second segment of this How to Do a Review, How to Do an Album Review podcast, my guest is Brandon, a.k.a. Beezy430 of Dead End Hip Hop. Hey, how you doing, dude?
What's going on, Needle Drop? What up, though? What up, though, everybody? Appreciate y'all listening. You know, we about to get into this, have some fun, you know?
All right. So in the first half of the segment, I talked a lot about how to do a review. I was asking Zoe Camp how to write a review, how to create a review, what her thoughts were going into a review, but a lot of her experience is mostly text-based when it comes to reviews. You're obviously, you know, where I am sort of on the YouTube platform, but even what you guys are doing is vastly different from what I'm doing because, you know, even though I may be on camera, I'm still kind of formally writing a review and then delivering it on camera after it's 100% written. I mean, what you guys are doing, a lot of the magic, I imagine, just sort of happens on camera at that very moment, right there, sort of live, with the fact that you guys kind of approach reviews with multiple personalities in a bit of a round table format.
Yes, that is true, because, and it's funny you say that, because it's as much as when we listen, if we know what album we're going to review, like as a crew, as much as I want to like talk to Mike or like talk to Ken or like talk to people about it, it's like, let me just hold off. Let me hold my emotions until we're all together. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, it's more like a just, you know, even with friends, even for me growing up with friends, you know, we always talk about albums together. And it was that organic, natural reaction with the, you thought what? Like, you tripping. So, you know, going in with the fellas, I have that same mentality because now I've known them for a long time now. So it's like, oh man, I can't wait to say what I want to say, and I can't wait to hear what, you know, people think. Is he gonna say anything that's gonna trigger me, or is Mike gonna say something that's gonna trigger me, or if Ken? Yeah, it's just just us. It's just pure raw emotion when you watch our videos, because that's what you're gonna get. Nothing like written down or nothing premeditated thought about it or anything. It's just all like raw emotion.
So you may have had these conversations when you were younger with friends about music, but did you follow reviews at all when you were younger? Like if something were to get a double XL or 4 or 5 mics, is that something that would grab your attention and sort of make you listen to a record, or make you listen to a record twice if you had already decided you didn't like it or something?
Yes, one particular, pretty much the only one for me back from the late 80s to about 96, 97 was The Source magazine. I value mics a lot from them. Like like the back then, The Source was almost not like 100%, but it was a good, I say 60 to 70% of reasons why I would buy an album based off their rating, because I know that they were very tough in their rating. Because there's been plenty of albums that I love that only got 3.5 mics. But if I see an artist get 4 or 4.5, I'm buying it instantly without even hearing a single or anything. And a good 90% chance I'm gonna enjoy that album. So The Source was the only one where it was kind of like my Bible back then, where I was like, if I'm not sure, well, if my friend says this, he likes this, but I can't really go by his opinion that much because we're so different. But if The Source gives it a rating that I think that's respectable, I'm going to go to the store and I'm going to buy it just off rip. So yeah, The Source was definitely my kind of go-to for written reviews.
That brings up a really interesting question. Do you see yourself as a tough critic, or if not, who in Dead End Hip Hop do you see as the toughest critic? And is being a tough critic important?
Yeah, to answer the second question first, yes, I think being a tough critic is important because sometimes you have to humble these artists, or just humble, and I hate to say this, but humble the fan base sometimes. Like, if stuff is whack or, is it not good, you're going to have to call it out. You're going to say what it is, and then plus it's our opinion. I'm pretty sure you get this same flack as well. But yeah, it's like if you calling something that's whack, that's you calling it whack. Regardless if I disagree with you or not, but I'm going to still respect your opinion. But it's okay to say that stuff is garbage or whack, or as what you would say on The Big Shine, no. Like you have to call stuff out for what it is. I don't have no issue with that. Now, the first question, do I consider myself a tough critic? At first, I didn't. I think when we first started doing Dead End Hip Hop, or when we first started really getting into reviewing albums and stuff and mixtapes, I didn't see myself as tough. But I guess the more we started doing this, I was looking like, damn, I am tough. But if I don't consider myself tough, I definitely consider Mike C-Town the toughest critic out of all of us, easily, in my hands down. But a lot of our fans and even the crew is saying that I'm becoming the toughest guy. So I guess it's like a tie between me and Mike. But you have to just call it is what it is. If you think it's whack, if it's not worth for you to purchase it, or if you don't feel like it's put together well, call it out for what it is. I don't have no issue with that. People laugh at me when I dog a record out, and I'm like, why y'all laughing at me? I'm just giving y'all the straight up what I feel is great opinions. You know what I'm saying?
I guess it's just kind of it's a different kind of it's just funny in a different way, because when you don't like a record, you just look like you're done.
Yes.
You just look like you're done, and that's it.
Prime example is that Riff Raff. I'm pretty sure you probably remember.
Yeah, I remember you looking pretty done with that.
Because you know what it was with that album? I could not believe like Mike, Ken, and FIFO was really giving that a pass. And it's like, dude, we've heard some rap projects and y'all dogged the heck out of them, and they didn't sound nowhere near as bad as this, and they was giving that a pass. So I was like stunned. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Me being the only person that just did not find that album amusing at all. But that's that emotion. It's the raw emotion that's coming out.
I think that brings up another interesting point. There are moments where you're sort of diametrically opposed. You're on the completely other side of the spectrum from the rest of the crew. In a format and sort of in a YouTube channel, in a discussion panel where you're finding that you have to have your opinion basically compete with 3, 4, sometimes 5 differing opinions. 3 or 4 differing opinions in a review. How important is it to you to sort of maintain your own stance and maintain your own ideas? Because I know that you obviously and the rest of the guys put an effort to not talk about a record before you talk about it on cameras, to kind of influence each other and kind of muddy those waters or anything like that. But sort of in the middle of that conversation, how do you kind of keep yourself grounded in your own opinion while all these other ideas and points of view are kind of flying in every other direction?
That's a good question, because it's been moments where Ken or all of them at some point will probably say something that I was either wanted to say about a record, or was planning on saying, and then they say it, and I just be like, oh my god, they didn't took my whole damn thought process or whatever. Especially Mike sometimes. Sometimes I'd be like, Mike, just go last, please, just because if you go before me, you're gonna say something that I know I'm gonna be like, yep. But I mean, if usually in that case, I just try to. It's really off the emotion, because if someone says something that's gonna trigger me, then I'm gonna kind of expand on my reasoning, or I like to call it piggyback. Like if Ken say something exactly what I said, I like to piggyback and just kind of like come up with my own, I guess, quote unquote Beezy430 thoughts about it, without trying to take Ken's word for word so much. Because yeah, you're right. By it being four of us, it's been times where a lot of us have said the same thing about a project, whether we hated or didn't like it or was so about it. So yeah, sometimes that's the tough part about reviewing. Sometimes I'm like, FIFO, you got the upper hand, because we always let FIFO go first. I don't know why we came up with that system, but I look at FIFO sometimes as he started talking. I'm like, you motherfucker, you better not say something that I was gonna say. But once he don't, and Ken go, or if I go second, I'm like, cool, let me get my thoughts out right now, and then y'all gonna piggyback off of me. You know what I'm saying? So that's how I look at it. But yeah, that's a good question. I mean, all I can do is just kind of like, as it's happening, my brain just start rolling. Like I'm like, okay, oh, he said this, so now what I'm gonna come with now? Blah 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 blah. It's really like on the fly. Like all the stuff that people see, everything is clearly on the fly. Like I'm really just like winging it. We all like winging it pretty much.
Yeah. No, I mean, because while I'm not doing what I do in kind of in a panel format, though I occasionally do the review discussion here and there, I try to do my best to avoid any and all opinions before I, end up doing a review, at least a lengthy opinion. You can't avoid the opinions of the fans. Right. They'll be hitting you before the review's even out saying, it's the best thing you've ever heard. You better give it a 10. Yeah. You better give it a 9. You better give it an 8. It's the worst album I've ever heard in my life. You're going to hate it. Yep. You're already going to hear that whole spectrum of opinions before you come out with the review. Yep. But I'll try to avoid the opinions of people who sort of I respect before going into a review, because that might sort of influence me. But speaking of the audience, in your experience as a reviewer, because I feel like if there's one thing that's vastly different from the reviews of today, whether you're doing them in text, whether you're doing them in video, whether they're formal or they're reactions or, roundtables like what you guys are doing, the audience plays a role in the whole thing that they never have before. It's not just PR people and record labels and, radio stations and airwaves telling you something's good, something's popular, something's hot, this needs to be reviewed right now. Now the audience is playing that role, sort of like I'm sure you experienced in the run-up to the Kendrick Lamar review that you guys have just dropped. Yeah. I'm sure you were getting all kinds of social media messages and emails and death threats too. Right. People sending you pictures of your house and everything, like, you review this now. You review this right now.
Right.
The audience is playing a role that they never have before because the internet is sort of making things a two-way street. Yep. You may have kind of found a way to stay solid in your opinion amongst the rest of the crew. But, is it ever sort of a struggle to sort of stand your ground when hundreds or maybe even thousands collectively of people are kind of coming at you guys saying, you're wrong about this one. Your opinion's wrong. I hate you guys. I'm unsubscribing.
Oh, I love it. I mean, I love when people, especially if it's an album that I like dogged out, like, for example, like a Big Sean album or whatever. I love when people like come at me, trying to like, change my brain or have me thinking differently or telling me, oh, here go one. When they tell you how to listen to an album, I'm pretty sure you got that a million times. Yeah. They tell me that I'm not listening to an album correctly. How are you going to tell me how I'm going to consume music that I've been listening to practically my whole life? So, I mean, yeah, stuff like that. I'm still going to be strong on my opinions regardless of how I feel. If I love the album and the fans tell me that they hate it and they say, oh, man, this is boring, Beezy, this sucks or whatever, obviously sometimes you got to watch when they trolling, but there's some people that actually have at least in the comment sections. I'm really good at replying in comment sections. Usually it's people that'll give me some good stands on why they hate or love the album, and then I'm gonna guess what, I'm gonna reply right back in that comment section and tell them why this album is great, why I think it's great, why I think it's whack, why I think it's so on and so forth. So I like it. I mean, long as it's not on the trolling level, I love when I'm challenged online or on Twitter or whatever, because well, basically in the comments, because I can type a little more. 140 characters on Twitter seems to be a little bit too limited for me to be arguing back and forth with folks. But I catch you in the Facebook or YouTube comics. I love it. I take it on. I love it.
Early on, and you tell me if you've had experience with this. I mean, really early on, when my audience started to grow, there were moments where, sort of the backlash of negativity would really shake me. I mean, I'm at the point where, I love it now. The drama is amazing. But yeah, sure. I mean, there were points, and, I was in my early to mid 20s at the time, probably not as solid in my opinions and my musical experience as you guys probably were when you started the channel, because you guys were like lifelong hip hop fans, whereas I was trying to review so many genres at the time when I was starting the channel, some of which I wasn't nearly as experienced with as others. And there were people, and sometimes I would have to kind of like rethink my thoughts on the way that I would talk about records in certain genres, because I needed to pick up on certain terminology, or there were certain things I should have been bringing up that I wasn't, that, maybe I liked or disliked, but didn't think to say anything about it because that just didn't kind of strike me as something to bring up. But, that's something that, an electronic music fan might pick up or want to point out, or a metal fan might want to pick up and point out, or a hip hop fan might want to pick up and point out, but sort of the crowd does kind of add that extra layer of difficulty in a sense, with how kind of hard they can push back. But ultimately, I think it's a good thing, because I think if you kind of wall yourself up away from them, I think it can prevent you from being honest, because you kind of feel separated from the whole thing, and you feel like you can just kind of say whatever bullshit that you want to say,
right?
Even if it's completely unjustified,
right?
Like, it makes you actually kind of think twice about what you're going to say and putting it the right way, because if you sure, if you're doing a negative review, you may want to say something harsh, you may want to say something that pisses people off, to like communicate effectively, like, this sucks. But if you're trying to daintily dance around an album to say, hey, like, I don't think it's great, but it's not terrible, or even to say an album is great, you may misspeak or may say something off base or whatever. I think having an audience sort of reacting to what you're doing in real time and sort of leaving you feedback, whether it's crazy troll comments or long-winded, well thought out and well written comments, I think it's helpful and ultimately sort of a healthy thing for not only what I'm doing, but kind of the music community at large, because I think, while you guys are doing what you're doing, I'm doing what I'm doing, I think we're all kind of a part of a larger sort of communal discussion, part of music culture that's going on right now, where you do have kind of opinions flying in every direction about every new album.
Right. It's like you said too, like I said, I like it because it brings on a great healthy debate. If you minus the trollers, but like people who really, dispute your opinion, I think it's great it's great for healthy conversation and healthy debate. Because I mean, I'm the same way when I watch sports shows. It's certain people I watch that I know that's going to rile me up. If they're going to say something, I'm gonna be like, you out of your mind. So I'm glad that people like you, people like me, and Dead and Hip Hop, we bring that same emotion and bring that out in our fans. You know what I'm saying? That people that watches our show on a regular basis, they're gonna still love what you got to say, regardless if they disagree with you or agree with you. I love that when you can still respect it, but you still want to dispute, like, hey, I think you're wrong because da 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 da. Like, I think that's good. I think that's great.
This recent Kendrick Lamar review has me thinking of sort of another question, something that I probably wouldn't have thought to ask before this review even came out, but I feel like this album brought a particularly interesting set of opinions, because the album is not so clear cut like Kendrick's previous couple of records. And because of that, I think that has led to this really wide array of different interpretations of the album. And what's funny is I've had so many comments and so many really angry, passionate emails and, you know, various correspondence sent to me about this album. And each of them are sort of like dead set and 100% convinced that their interpretation is 100% right and I'm wrong and they have the point of view of the record. But what's funny is like every single time somebody puts that amount of effort into trying to quote unquote understand the album, like all of their interpretations are different. You know, they each come at me with like a different kind of point of view or a different take on different things of the album. Yeah. But and it's almost like it's gotten to the point, especially with kind of the rumors that were surrounding the release of this supposed second album. Right. It's like things have almost gotten like conspiratorial. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like people are starting to like put together the, you know, the Illuminati clues and shit like that. And it feels like it's just kind of gone overboard to the point where it's not even really an opinion anymore and just kind of a conspiracy theory.
One thing I will say about Kendrick Lamar albums, I think he with fans, I think they put him in this box that where they're so used to him having these conceptual, well thought out projects, you know, Good Kid, Mad City, To Pimp a Butterfly, you know, even Section 80 to a certain point, it was a theme, some type of a theme right there going on with that album, with the exception of Untitled Unmastered. So I think with this album, you know, especially after people listen to it, and then, you know, of course, you know what happened in the song Duckworth at the end and everything, people lost their mind. Then they started tying in with, oh, he made this album cover because this was green, and then he made this. And I don't know if you saw this bit too, where in the video of DNA, how they like, oh, look, Kendrick got a red a red wristband on one wrist and then a green wristband on the other. Oh, he ain't slick. He's about to come up with another album on Sunday. Like, I was like, what is wrong with y'all? Like, y'all are really thinking too deep on this album, and I think y'all really putting Kendrick in his box, and I think it's kind of unfair. I mean, it's great that he's put on this such high level and to put out quality conceptual albums, but, you know, what if the guy just want to release an album just for us to enjoy, you know, just for us to listen to without all the deep meaning? Of course he's going to have different emotions going on through the album. Like you said, it's all over the place. I agree with you on that. But, you know, what's wrong with just having something that you just want to pop in and just listen to and enjoy? People are thinking too deep with all these theories and these second albums and all this other crap. It's ridiculous.
At least for me, it's kind of the duty of the reviewer to demystify that a little bit. And I personally would have probably done that a little bit more in my review had I maybe done it a little bit later, because so many of these theories have kind of proliferated. And, you know, while music is definitely subjective, I feel like there are some objective truths to it that you can definitely set the record straight on. Right. You know, and at least in the case of this, I mean, just to, you know, I know Damn is a different project from anything Kendrick has done before, but I feel like it's very much the same than everything he's been doing up until this point, in that he's still a very emotional, raw and honest and down to earth and straightforward guy. You know, he's telling you what he's going through. He's telling you his perspective on things. Why can we not just accept this album for face value? Right. You know, like, why does it need to mean something that it's not? Why can't it just be a really talented artist kind of stating his perception on things, you know, which is what I feel like Damn is in a lot of respects.
We was telling people, stop it with these dang on conspiracy theories. Just enjoy the album for it. Like, enjoy it. Like, I mean, that's what we've always done before, is like, we've enjoyed albums. I mean, sure, it's going to be, it might be a tie-in here and there with, you know, his previous albums, or it might be something, like you said, it might be some deeper meaning to something. Just take the album for what it is and enjoy it. It's been plenty of artists, a lot of artists that made well thought out projects. MF Doom had made some well conceptual thought out projects, but he also made some projects that you just want to just pop on and just enjoy. There's nothing wrong with that. Just take it for what it is. Don't be like, oh, it's a Doom album. What is he trying to decipher this time? Or like, how I'm going to decipher his rhyme scheme on this album. Like, just accept it for what it is and enjoy the freaking album.
Yeah, I guess some people go into an album like it's a science project.
Yeah, and exactly.
You know, what's funny is we're both reviewers, and it's funny because we're going into this conversation saying, hey, you know what? Don't treat an album like that, because I feel like too often reviewers are kind of stereotyped as being that kind of person. You know, the person who thinks too much about the album and they take it too seriously and they can't just sit down and enjoy a record. Meanwhile, we're not sitting here talking about the conspiracy theories around Damn. We're not talking about what conspiracy theory, you know, like if you listen to this fucking track when the moon is in this phase and, you know, the constellations are in such an arrangement, then, you know, all of a sudden you're going to look into your email inbox and the second album is going to be in your email.
Right.
Are there ways that you try to stay grounded when doing a review so that you come through in a way that's, I guess, kind of relatable and, you know, really personable? Because if there's one thing that you guys are great at, it's just kind of coming across as just average, honest, just fans of the music and nothing more, nothing less.
That's the purpose right there. That was our sole purpose when we started doing Dead End Hip Hop, because we was like, look, Dead End Hip Hop generally has been going on since we were kids, since before we was born. People have been talking about music. People have been sitting around talking about music together for decades. So it was like, you know, reason why we just want to stay grounded. Main thing, we just want to still be yourself. Still be yourself. Go into it. Still, I'm going to still give stuff the reaction the same way I would give a reaction if I was off camera. You know what I'm saying? If we wasn't recording, if me and you and Mike was talking about some music, I'm going to still be the same guy if we was recording on the camera, is like the mini collabs we done before. Yeah, I mean, we done plenty of collabs before, so yeah, you get it. So yeah, it's just like you have to still just think about, just like I said, the natural rawness of it. It's just, I guess for me, it just comes natural because I don't think about how I'm going to react. It just happens when it happens, I guess.
You know, the way you were kind of saying what you were saying about, you know, just staying raw and personal and honest, I feel like that's a quality that is so important and so integral to a lot of these video reviews that you see right now. But is that to kind of imply that the era of text reviews that kind of preceded all of this, that was dishonest, that was not honest? Not only that question, but have you ever read a review that like maybe pops up in your head that you felt like wasn't an honest review?
You know what? That's a good question, because yeah, it's been reviews. This was like kind of during the decline of the source, like when I was just kind of like, okay, I'm done with them. And you know, you read certain reviews, and of course, this is when the time when labels really started putting their, you know, hands in with these magazines with the XXLs, the Source. It was another one I'm forgetting too. But yeah, like, so when I started finding out that these labels was really kind of putting their fingers in the hands and knowing some of these writers and everything, and when I'm like, as I'm listening to the album, I'm like, man, this album is trash. Why is the Source rating this 4 mics 4.5? And it's like, I'm reading it, and just something about it just doesn't seem genuine about it. Like, it just seems like, I don't know if they're being paid off by someone, or is someone throwing them some nice little extra cash to say, hey, you know, talk about good on my review, talk about good on this particular albums that come out for this particular label, then you get this certain amount of money. So yeah, like in that late 90s, it was a lot of reviews I used to read, and I used to be like, this does not seem genuine at all. Like, I need someone to talk to me about this and like give me a face-to-face genuine feeling of why they think this album is this good or why they think it's this bad. So yeah, you're right. You absolutely right. That's a good question, because it was reviews where I was like, that don't seem genuine. Like, who's paying you, buddy? Like, for real.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely feel like when I was checking out some reviews in Spin, either in like when I was in high school and later on in college, when I would see some music review websites like Pitchfork, for example. I mean, I'm not talking about these publications across the board as institutions, but every once in a while I would see a review that, I don't know, while I didn't have any proof in my pocket that, you know, that was like, oh, this is totally, you know, this person's been paid, or this is a lie, or da-da-da-da-da, you know, it did kind of feel like there was a bit of an agenda going on, or like some kind of bias that, while I have my biases and I'm sure you have your biases, you know, we kind of come out and admit them. You know what I mean? Like, it's been well documented that sites like Pitchfork, or at least for a long span of time, had a Brooklyn bias. You know, it was like, it seemed like almost any and every popular little upstart 15 minutes of fame buzz indie band that would come out of the woodwork from Brooklyn was like, oh, this is great. It's an 8-point, whatever. It's the best new music. It's the best new music, no matter what. You know, meanwhile, there are other reviews that, and it's easy. It's even easier today than it was back then, thanks to social media. You could see what writers are talking to what artists and flirting with who and popping up at what parties and da-da-da-da-da. And it's like, oh, so even though the internet does allow things to be more personal, the dishonesty is still there, and it's kind of easier to pick it out and highlight it out because you could see who's friends with who or talking shit about who, about where, and who's had a bad experience with this other person, and it's all documented. So then later down the road, when the bad review or the super positive review pops up, it's like, oh, okay, makes sense now.
And also too, what you said was funny. Like how we all admitted our biases, but at the same time, if that artist that we're, super huge fans of, if they release some, average to below average stuff, we're going to call them out. I mean, it's not like we might have our bias, but if you coming out with a whack project or a project I feel that's not up to your standards, I'm going to call you out. I'm going to say, look, this is beneath you. Prime example. That's
always hard though. That's always hard though.
Like, and I'm going to give you a prime example of that too. Recently, last year when we reviewed Tribe Called Quest, we got it from here.
Okay, yeah.
And everyone, like people, fans, everybody, the crew, they know I'm a huge Quest fan. Granted, though, I still like the album. I enjoyed it, but I didn't nowhere near love it as much as Ken, Mike, and we had a guest on there, Kyle, who's actually like older than all of us, and he's been like an avid hip hop listener for decades. But he loved it. Mike loved it and Ken loved it. I was like, yeah, I like it, but I mean, for me being a diehard Quest fan, I just felt like this album wasn't the it factor for me. It didn't pull me like the rest of the Tribe Called Quest albums. And I'm a huge Quest fan, so of course Mike and them was losing their freaking mind. But I'm like, look, it was a good album, but I just didn't love it. Like you guys, they thought it was just like excellent from beginning to end. I'm like, no, they had definitely some slip ups on this album, like for sure, but. Yeah, like it's hard. It was tough, and like what you said, it was tough for me. Like it was really tough for me to be so critical. Same way with De La Soul. Like I didn't even like De La Soul's album, their last album that they got off of Kickstarter, that they raised a lot of money off of. I didn't even love that album, and I freaking love De La Soul. And if you watch that review again, you can tell how sad I was. Like I looked like a sad puppy because I had to like give a negative review for I had to give a negative review for one of my favorite like hip hop groups. You know what I'm saying? So I was like,
yeah, I mean, let's demystify that sort of assumption that a lot of people make, because the thing is, I feel like a lot of people may see you do a negative review or see me do a negative review and assume that we're doing that because we want to be mean, or we're doing that because we're having fun doing that. And it's never easy, especially when that artist has come out with 3, 4, 5 projects that you're super impressed with.
Yeah.
You don't want anything else but for the next project to be good. That's all you want.
They set that bar.
But the thing is,
that bar is set.
But you've heard so many that you know when you're excited and when you're not. You know when you're liking something and when you're not. And if you're not excited, you can't come on camera and pretend to be when you're not, which I think, is part of the way that the camera kind of keeps people honest.
And it could be, like you said, 5 good projects, and it could be one dull, but I would be so sad that's a bad project that it just would be, I can't be excited. People who know me know that I won't be excited about it. But yeah, Mike and them of course they were surprised, because it wasn't like I told them how I was feeling before we reviewed it. So yeah, when they came up, they was just like, what? But you love them, B. But I'm like, yeah, but this was just bad. It's just, it hurts. It's like I said, it hurts when that happens.
Moving on from, what I sort of see as like the next stage of kind of what we're doing right now. I mean, since my channel came up and your channel came up, there's been this huge kind of growth within the sector of YouTube reviews in this whole reaction genre.
Yeah.
What's your take on a lot of these reaction videos generally? Do you feel like they're effective at what they're doing? I mean, it's sort of twofold. For me, it's like you do kind of get those raw emotional reactions, in an almost stronger way than you would in just kind of the formal review format. But then there's really nothing like in terms of anything kind of, I guess, conversationally gained from what's going on, because you're kind of reacting to it right there. You haven't had time to think about it, I mean, I think case in point is that some of these reaction reviewers, they had the Kendrick Lamar reaction that they came out with, and then maybe a week or so later, it was like, okay, here's my Kendrick Lamar final verdict now. When it's like, I don't know, for me, I would much rather just gather all my thoughts together before I've even said anything, and then just kind of tell you what I finally think after, I've kind of really had my full experience with the album after multiple listens.
I think we're just in that time now where people like seeing that raw. What are your first impressions when you're listening to this song or this album? I think people don't mind that. I think people like,
and people just want what they want fast too.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
And that format is the fastest way to do it.
Fastest way to do it, and it's easier to do it. For people who are recording it, who's providing that content, is easier. And like you said, I just think people just like that quick reaction. They like to see that.
And I think that sort of adds to the fact that, in the internet age, opinions have really been democratized. People really want to know what everybody's thinking. Like they want to see opinions about some new album that they've heard on Twitter, and they want to see a bunch of people reacting to it in real time on YouTube. And, they just want to be hit with so many different thoughts and ideas about this thing that they're listening to. Do you think, obviously, it's not all a bad thing because we sort of benefit off of that.
Right.
Right. But are there sort of negatives? Are there downsides to that? Because, I think it does kind of create a situation where you're not really enjoying the album and all you're doing is just consuming all these opinions of the album. Or, further down that road, it could create a situation like what we saw with the Kendrick album where everybody's not enjoying the album. They're just creating conspiracy theories around the album.
Right. Usually with that situation, I try to ignore as much of that as possible, because it's like one of those things where I'm like, okay, let me listen to the album, let me enjoy it, let me try to, or as what you would say, dissect the album on my own, because some of that stuff can cloud it. Like with you, for you example, like if you were reviewing an album before us and it's an album I know we're going to review, I'll wait till after we review it, then I'll probably be like, okay, let me check out and see what Anthony's, what Fantano's saying about, what he felt about this album. Not after we got done shooting it. So it's just like I try to keep away from all that negative stuff. Not negative, but just all that bugging. But like you said, we benefit from it because people watch us. They can't wait to see it, which I think is good. I think that's cool for them to be eager to hear our opinions. Because I was that same eager kid, 6-7 years old, seeing what the store's gonna say about how many mics they're gonna give this album. So I think it's good, but when you throw in social media in there, it can get a little nerve wracking. It's just like, because it'd be times where I just be like, okay, I'm just staying off social media. I don't need to see nothing. I don't need to hear anything. Me and you, we both got it with the Kendrick Lamar review. Any TDE review, Kanye West stuff. The list can go on as far as artists that's like, when people release stuff, they just gonna lose their mind and hit us within 2 minutes after the album dropped, so I just try to stay away from stuff like that, and I just still be thankful that they still want to watch our videos.
Well, thinking about those kinds of technicalities and the thing that you're specifically focused on, and if I could just kind of ask you a hip hop question or two, since you guys are really just kind of geared and centered on that genre in your series. Are there certain criteria or sort of things you go into an album looking for or listening for, specific to the hip hop genre? Because, that's just kind of the genre you guys are centered around.
Yeah, definitely centered, of course, production, because everybody always be like, oh yeah, we know you're going to be specific about the production. So that, MC, the voice, sometimes, voice does make a difference. I ain't gonna say whether me liking MC or not, because we all know Danny Brown has a voice that's an acquired taste. So yeah, voice, I think, of course, lyrics. Kind of like, I guess this is like a weird for me that I always do. I've always kind of put the album cover into like what the artist is trying to say or talk about. And I think I said that on some of the Dead and Hip Hop videos before, where I'm like, I look at the album cover and be like, okay, so maybe this person is probably going to do this. So as I'm listening to the album, I'm kind of like trying to picture what they was trying to vividly do with the album cover. Sometimes it works for me. Like, it really works. I'm like, well, damn, the album cover, that makes sense. Like, da-da-da-da. So that, I know it's weird, but that's just like my little only thing I always been doing since I was young. And what else? I guess in like the mixes of the beat and of the album itself, like, does it sound clear? Is it meant to sound muddy? Is it meant to sound a certain way? So stuff like that is what I pretty much what I get into. I guess like the basic stuff.
Is it hard to kind of hold true to these criteria, or at least kind of hold the same standards for them that maybe you used to when you would listen to music when you're younger, with artists out there like Danny Brown and Tyler the Creator or Death Grips or Young Thug, artists who are really unorthodox in their approach to all these things, who, I mean, you know, they're making either, I guess you could say, good music or music that at least appeases their fans, but the way that they approach things like production or, you know, the vocal approach, you know, it isn't, you couldn't call it good by traditional standards, I guess. Right.
Yeah, that's kind of true, because I think going in, just for example, I'll give you an example. Like when we reviewed Migos' album, like I wasn't going into that review the same way I was going into, like, let's say a Rock Marciano or a Kai review. Sure. You know what I'm saying? Because I know those guys are completely different. You know, Migos is completely different from Kai as far as sound, the way they rap, everything. So, you know, yeah, certain artists, I kind of go into it differently. I'm not going to go into Migos, a Gucci Mane album like I am a Skyzoo, you know, someone that's really thought out type of artist, you know, Killer Mike, you know, LP. Like, I'm gonna go into it differently. So I'm gonna go into it as like someone like Migos, who I've heard, or Future. I'm going into it like, okay, if I'm in a strip club, will I enjoy listening to this music while I'm in a strip club? Probably so. Like, you know, so I guess from that standpoint, from that scale, then I'm going to say, yeah, you know, Migos is okay with me. I probably might not listen to that album on a regular basis, or probably ever again, until I go into a strip club or something like that. Then, yeah, the same way I would do an MF Doom album. I'm not going to judge it that same way.
So in a way, everything kind of has its time, its place, its context, or whatever. You know, its moment that it fits in.
Yeah, and even if it does fit, even I can probably like it or still dog it out, but I'ma still understand, like, okay, I know what this music is for. This is for that type of scene. It's not for headphone music where I'm gonna sit down, or if I want to listen to something, you know, just chilling and relaxing. You know what I'm saying? So it's this type of music you can have when you just got people over, you're having a barbecue, or just having to get together, something like that. I mean, you know, certain music is good for certain moods. I might not want to fit that particular mood all the time, so I might, you know, dog it out, but I still understand it for what it is.
Given that you guys focus pretty much just on hip hop in the reviews that you do on the channel, what do you feel like makes the genre so unique to review? You know, what do you feel like makes the genre different from other genres when it comes to either the musical experience or just kind of the challenge of kind of talking about it and reviewing it for an audience?
I guess the fact that, at least I feel, hip hop has been such a young man's game. It's like every time we're reviewing something, you know, at our age, of course, we're being older, it's like people look at us like, well, you can't talk about this particular artist because you're not at a certain age. Like, if you're a certain age, the music has to be good or bad. You know, if you're a certain age. Like, if we, like, for example, Future. If 3 out of 4 of us didn't like Future, all they're gonna say is, oh, you have to be young to like it, or you're all too old to understand it. Which is not the case, because I've known and seen older dudes or dudes my age that enjoy Future just as much as a 19-year-old. So, I mean, I think...
Well, what's funny is Future's not even that young himself.
Exactly. Like, I think Future's probably older than me, you know, and this is like...
And you know, you have all these kids who are listening to 2 Chainz, and he's in his 40s.
In his 40s, exactly. It's like, I mean, y'all talking about us being old, but y'all know, like, 2 Chainz is, like, older than us. Like, so it's crazy. That's one thing I guess that's one thing I don't like about the genre, because it's like, to me, it's the only genre that don't respect its legends. So, like, if you bring up a Cool G Rap to someone, you know, a kid gonna be like, who? But if you in R&B, and if you a young singer, if you bring up Marvin Gaye or Stevie Wonder, they gonna be like, oh my God, that's like Jesus or whatever. But if you do the same way,
or if you say something bad about Marvin Gaye or Stevie Wonder, everybody's gonna look at you like, what's wrong with you?
But that young R&B artist not gonna say nothing bad about him. Whereas a young hip hop artist, you see someone like, you know, Lil Yachty, a Young Thug, and be like, you know, who is Rakim? Like, forget Rakim. Like, oh man, that dude, it's like, dude, that dude, like, is like one of the dudes that laid down the foundation. Or who's DJ Kool Herc? Like, they're not gonna care about that. They don't care about the legends. That's the only genre that does not care about the legends.
Do you feel like that point of view, though, kind of comes with the competition and the attitude of rap music?
Yeah, it does. I mean, because you all guys are always trying to. One of my best friends said, like the rap game is like a hotel. Like soon you check out, is somebody that's gonna be hot, that's gonna check in. Like that's gonna check in the hotel, and why that other hot person is checking out. So and I think and it goes back to my other point where I think it's just such a young man's game. Like people always want to kind of stay hip onto something fresh and new. Once you get a certain age or a certain type of demographic, it's like we're gonna push you out. So that's why it's a competition. I think that's why that competition stays fresh because a lot of some of these guys have been making music for a long time. They still like, look, I can do this just as well as that new hot dude that's making music right now. So it can be good. It's healthy, if the music is good. But if you're just trying to blend in, I've seen it a lot where a lot of these older, veteran MCs try to hop on something like new and trendy, and it's like, dude, that's not you. What are you doing? Like, stop. So
Sure.
And I'm pretty sure you've seen that before too with some hip hop artists. Oh my God, like, why are you hopping on that wave?
You say it's a young man's game, but do you feel like that's changing though? With guys like you and the rest of Dead End Hip Hop who, yeah, you may be older, but you're still very much one of the more consistent and notable outlets out there when it comes to hip hop reviews, and you guys aren't, backing down or fading away or anything like that. You're keeping your opinions there in the circle, just like with a lot of these young kids' opinions. And not only that, but, you have artists like 2 Chainz and Future who do appeal to a younger audience, but they are older. You have artists like Danny Brown who, part of his whole backstory, part of his whole shtick is that, he sees himself as old at this point. Yep. Or, at least at the release of Old and the release of 30, age has always kind of been an important thing for him. Kanye West who is, starting to push for you. It seems like it's not as much a young man's game as it used to be.
No, it's not. It's not because. But you know what I think it is too sometimes? I think and I tease my younger fan base, about this all the time. Like they always get on me, Ken or Mike for like trying to quote unquote hang on to some of the legends, like, hang on to the Coogee Raps. Oh, y'all still hanging on to, the Redmans, y'all still hanging on to Raekwon. It's like some of these younger cats are starting to do that with Lil Wayne. Because, like, as they see Lil Wayne getting older, like you said, Lil Wayne, Kanye West, these guys are getting older. They may not be as or putting out as masterpieces of albums that they did in their earlier career, but the younger generation is still hanging on to these Lil Waynes and the Kanye Wests and all them. And it's like a full circle for me. I look at it as like it's like full circle. But yeah, to answer your question, I do think it's kind of getting out of that because you look at Kendrick Lamar, he's 30 now. Drake, I think Drake is 30 or 31. And I think long as that core fan base is still with you, regardless of your age, I think we're kind of still seeing like kind of a little bit, because you still got a lot of young dudes that's still in the game, like Lil Yachty. He's like clearly like what 20 years old, Uzi. So you got a few of them, but I don't think it's shifting. I don't think it's going to be like, oh yeah, 35, 40 is cool, but I do think that you still got that older group of guys that still kind of got their clear fan base. Because I can see Kendrick still doing this to 35, 35, almost 40. And if he's still putting out quality albums, we're still going to eat it up regardless of his age. I think the young people will too, not as if it's a new wave that's coming up.
Final question before I close things up. How important is sort of the history of the genre that you're talking about when going into a review? Do you feel like, you guys kind of have that on lock? Do you feel like that's something that is lacking in other reviews or with other reviewers? Let me know what you think.
Yeah, I think history is definitely important because sometimes history can give a new fan some sort of like a background. Like if they want to do I call this the background check of hip hop. If you want to kind of do a background check, I think when we're reviewing, especially like older artists that's been in the game for 20 some plus years, we always like talk about, hey, look, this person did this. He worked with this. If you thought the artist that you like today, go back and listen to where he got this, or create this sound or got inspired by this particular sound or this particular, style of rap or style of trap, trap rap or southern rap or whatever. So I think history is definitely important, especially dealing with the genre of hip hop. Because like I said before, I think it's the only genre where they don't respect the legends or give notice to the legends. You know what I'm saying? Like any other genre does. So I think history is definitely important, man. When you go, and especially it just gives a background of that artist. Because for people like me and you, when we're talking about these artists, I think it's great that we give them a background of some sort of a small history of when this artist got started, where can you check out their stuff at, how they established their style, and where they probably got inspired by or influenced by a style. So history is very important, man, in my opinion, especially when it comes to hip hop culture.
And important to bring up in a review too.
Yep.
You're saying.
Yep, and it's important to bring up in a review. Yeah, like I said, we talked about Coogee Rap, we talked about Scarface, and we went through the history on them. You know what I'm saying? It's just like you have to know why we are reviewing this artist and why we put him on such a high standard in the first place. You know, it's like this guy laid down a certain foundation for, you know, whatever coast, West Coast, East Coast, down south. You know, if we're going to talk about that, we got to bring that up. You know, it's important. We feel like it's definitely important because a lot of people are not bringing that up.
All right. I want to thank Beezy430 for being on the episode of the podcast and sort of having a discussion with me about how to review an album, sort of what goes through his mind when reviewing an album, and sort of peeling back the curtain a little bit with the process of sort of doing an album review with Den and Hip Hop. I'm going to drop his YouTube channel, his personal Twitter account, of course, the Den and Hip Hop YouTube account down in the description. Thanks for being on, man.
Thank you, man. Thanks for having me. This was fun. This was awesome.